The night I ran, I did not know he could smell fear like blood in water. I was almost at the gate, my hands were shaking, my breath was loud in my ears. Then I heard him. Not his footsteps, his breathing. He was standing behind me before I even saw him move. His eyes were not gold anymore. They were dark, wild, like something inside him had broken free. "You smell like mine," he said. His voice was low, too calm, too dangerous. I stepped back, he stepped forward. "You are not leaving this house," he said. "Not tonight, not ever." I wanted to scream, but my body would not move, because for 1 second under all that fear I felt something else. I felt safe. And that scared me more than he did. Hey, before we go any further, if you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button. I've got so many more waiting for you. Now, let's go back to where it all began. My name is Ren Sato, and until 3 weeks ago my life was small in the best way. I worked at a flower shop near the university. I paid my rent late sometimes. I argued with my roommate about dishes. Nothing about my life was special. That is exactly why I liked it. The flower shop sat on a quiet corner, the kind of street tourists never find. Every morning I opened the shutters and let the cold air in before the sun warmed it. I trimmed stems. I wrapped bouquets in brown paper. I listened to old customers talk about their grandchildren. It was a simple job, but it was mine, and I was proud of it in a way I never tried to explain to anyone. I did not know kings still existed. Not real ones. Not ones with armies and titles and old blood that people whispered about like it was something dangerous. I thought that world ended a long time ago, replaced by suits and boardrooms and men who only pretended to have power. I was wrong. The first time I saw Kael Draven, I did not know his name. I only knew he stood too still for a man his size. Most big men move like they are trying to take up less space, like they are apologizing for existing. Kael did not move like that. He stood in the doorway of my shop like the doorway belonged to him, like the whole street belonged to him, and somehow, without saying a word, he made me believe it too. He wore black, not the kind of black you buy off a rack. The kind tailored so close to the body that it looked less like clothing and more like a second skin. His hair was dark, swept back like he had somewhere important to be, and his eyes were a strange gold, the kind of gold you only see in old paintings, the kind that makes you forget what you were about to say. "I need flowers," he said. That was all, no greeting, no smile. I remember laughing just a little because it felt like a joke. A man dressed like that, standing in my small flower shop between the ferns and the cheap vases, asking for flowers like he was ordering coffee. He did not laugh back. He just watched me, waiting, like my laughter was something to be studied. "For what occasion?" I asked, because that is what you ask. That is the normal thing to ask. "No occasion," he said. "I saw them from the street. I wanted a closer look." I did not think much of it then. People say strange things. I picked a bundle of white lilies, wrapped them carefully, tied the paper with string the way my grandmother taught me. When I handed them to him, our fingers brushed for half a second. His hand was warm, too warm almost like he was running a fever he did not know about. He did not leave right away. He stood there a moment longer, looking at me the way you look at something you are trying to remember, something just out of reach. Then he left without paying, without a word of thanks, and I stood there holding an empty till and a strange feeling in my chest I could not name. I told my roommate about it that night. She laughed and called him a rich weirdo. I laughed too, and I believed her, because that was easier than believing anything else. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Always the same time, always dressed the same way, always asking for flowers he did not need. He never explained himself. I never asked him to. There was something about him that made questions feel unnecessary, like the answers would only complicate things I did not want complicated. By the second week, I noticed something strange. Every time he came close, I felt it before I saw it, a kind of pull, like standing near a fire without meaning to. My skin would warm. My heartbeat would change its rhythm, quicken without permission. I told myself it was nerves. Handsome men make people nervous. That is normal. That is human. But one evening, as he reached for a bundle of red roses, his hand brushed my wrist and something in him shifted. His eyes darkened just for a second, gold bleeding into something deeper, something almost black. His nostrils flared, subtle, like he was trying not to breathe too deeply. His jaw tightened. He pulled his hand back fast, like he had touched something hot. "I have to go," he said, voice rough, and left without his flowers. I stood there confused, watching the door swing shut behind him. What was that? I asked myself. What did I do? I did not have an answer, not yet. The next time he came, he brought someone with him. A tall woman in a dark suit, her expression sharp, her eyes moving around my small shop like she was cataloging every exit. She did not introduce herself. She simply stood by the door while Kael browsed the flowers, silent, watchful, like a guard dog waiting for a command. "Who is she?" I asked quietly once Kael reached the counter. "Someone who worries too much," he said. There was no humor in his voice. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to ask why a man who bought flowers he never used needed someone watching the door, but something about his tone told me the conversation was closed before it opened. I let it go. I always let things go too easily. That was my nature, and it would matter later, though I did not know it then. Weeks passed like that, him coming, me pretending not to notice how my body reacted to him, the strange warmth. The way sound seemed sharper when he was near, my own heartbeat loud in my ears like a second pair of footsteps. I told myself it was attraction, simple human attraction, nothing more complicated than that. But there were signs if I had looked closer. The way the guard woman flinched whenever Kael's eyes changed color, even slightly. The way he would sometimes catch himself mid-sentence, breathing carefully, like a man holding back something enormous behind a thin door. The way once I heard him mutter something under his breath that was not quite words, something closer to a growl, low and involuntary, gone as fast as it came. I should have asked questions. I know that now. But there is a strange kind of comfort in not knowing things, isn't there? A kind of safety in choosing the version of the story that lets you keep living your small, simple life. One night, closing the shop late, I found him waiting outside, leaning against the brick wall like he had been there for hours. The street was empty. The streetlights buzzed faintly overhead. "You should not be here this late," he said before I could speak. "I own a small flower shop, not a castle," I said, trying to sound light. "Nobody is coming for me." Something flickered across his face. Not anger. Something closer to fear, though I could not understand fear on a man who carried himself like nothing in the world could touch him. "You do not know what is coming," he said quietly. I laughed, nervous, unsure. That sounds dramatic. He did not laugh back. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel that same strange warmth radiating off him, close enough that my heart started that unfamiliar rhythm again, loud and fast and confused. "Stay away from the East Road tonight," he said, "please." I did not understand the warning. Not then. I only understood the way his voice cracked slightly on the word please, like a man unused to asking for anything, like the word cost him something to say. I nodded, more out of instinct than understanding. He studied my face a moment longer, like he was memorizing it, then turned and walked into the dark without another word. I stood there a long time after he left, arms wrapped around myself against the cold, staring down the empty street he had disappeared into. Something in my chest felt tight, unfamiliar, like a warning I did not know how to read. I did not know yet that the world I thought I understood was about to break apart completely. I did not know that the man buying flowers he never used was hiding something ancient and dangerous inside himself, something with claws and teeth and a hunger he could barely control. I did not know that in choosing to ignore all the signs, I was walking myself straight toward a night that would change everything. All I knew, standing there in the cold, watching an empty street, was that for the first time in my ordinary little life, I was afraid. And somewhere underneath that fear, quiet and confusing, was something that almost felt like anticipation. The East Road warning stayed in my head all night, but by morning in the light of a new day it felt small again, almost silly. I made myself coffee. I opened the shop. I told myself that whatever Kael was hiding, it was his business, not mine, and my job was to sell flowers, not solve mysteries. That plan lasted exactly one day. My roommate, Mia, worked late shifts at a restaurant on the east side of town, past the old bridge, near the edge of the business district where the buildings turned tall and glass and cold. She usually took the main road home. That night, for reasons I still cannot fully explain, she called me from a payphone, her voice shaking so badly I almost could not understand her. "Ren," she said, "something followed me." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean followed you?" "I do not know. I heard something behind me, big, fast. I ran into a store and locked the door and it just stopped outside like it was waiting." My stomach turned cold. "Where are you now?" "Still in the store. The owner called the police, but Ren, it is gone now. It is just gone, like it was never there." I told her to stay put, that I was coming, though I had no car and no real plan beyond moving my legs as fast as they would carry me. I grabbed my jacket and ran out into the dark street, my breath already ragged from fear rather than distance. The East Road was the fastest way to reach her. I knew Kael had warned me about it. I remember standing at the corner for one full second, his voice echoing in my head, "Stay away from the East Road tonight." But Mia's voice, shaking and small, was louder in my chest than any warning from a stranger who bought flowers he never used. I ran. The East Road at night looked nothing like it did during the day. The streetlights were dimmer here, spaced too far apart, leaving long stretches of shadow between each pool of orange light. The shops were closed, metal shutters pulled down, windows dark. My footsteps echoed too loudly against the pavement, and every echo made my heart jump higher into my throat. Halfway down the road, I heard it. A low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a breath, vibrating from somewhere in the darkness ahead. I stopped walking. My body went rigid, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but Mia was still ahead of me, waiting, scared, and I could not make my legs move backward. "Hello," I called out, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. Nothing answered, but the shadows near an alley entrance seemed to shift, just slightly, like something large had adjusted its weight. I should have run then. I know that now. Instead, curiosity or stupidity or some combination of both kept my feet planted, staring into the dark, waiting for my eyes to adjust enough to make sense of what I was seeing. Two eyes opened in the shadows. Not human eyes. They glowed faintly gold, catching what little light there was, fixed directly on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The shape behind those eyes was too large to be a dog, too low to be a man, covered in something that looked like fur catching moonlight in silver streaks. I stopped breathing. The creature stepped forward just enough for me to see the shape of powerful shoulders, a long snout, teeth catching the dim light. It was not attacking. It was simply watching me, head tilted slightly like it was deciding something. "Ren!" The voice came from behind me, sharp and urgent, and I spun around to see Kael standing there, chest heaving like he had been running, his eyes locked past me toward the creature in the alley. "Do not move," he said quietly. "Do not run." "What is that thing?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Someone who should not be out tonight," Kael said, his voice low, controlled, though I could hear something underneath it, something tight and dangerous, like a man holding back a storm behind his teeth. He stepped in front of me, placing his body between mine and the creature, and something about the movement was too fast, too fluid, more animal than human. The creature in the alley made a sound, somewhere between a whine and a snarl, and slowly backed away into deeper shadow before disappearing entirely. The silence afterward felt heavier than the fear before it. "You told me to stay away from this road," I said, my voice shaking now that the danger had passed, adrenaline draining out of me and leaving something closer to anger in its place. "You knew this would happen." Kael turned to face me, and in the dim streetlight I saw something in his expression I had never seen before. Guilt, maybe, or exhaustion, or both. "I did not know for certain," he said. "I hoped I was wrong." "What was that thing?" I asked again, louder this time. "And why did it look at me like that?" Kael was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding mine in a way that told me he was choosing his next words very carefully. "There are things in this world people do not talk about," he said finally. "Old bloodlines, old power, creatures that look like men most of the time and something else entirely on nights like tonight." "Are you saying that thing was a person?" I asked, disbelief creeping into my voice. "I am saying some people are not entirely people," Kael said. "Not all the time." I wanted to laugh, to call it a joke, but the memory of those glowing eyes was still too fresh, too real to dismiss so easily. My mind raced, trying to fit his words into some kind of logical shape and failing completely. "And you," I asked quietly, "are you one of them?" Kael's eyes finally met mine, gold catching the dim streetlight, something raw and unguarded flickering behind them for just a moment before he masked it again. "Yes," he said simply. The word hit me harder than I expected, not because I did not believe him, but because some part of me already had, some part of me had known since the first day he walked into my shop and stood too still, too composed, too controlled for an ordinary man. "Why did it back away from you?" I asked. "Because it recognized what I am," Kael said, "and it knows better than to challenge me." Before I could ask what exactly that meant, footsteps sounded behind us, and Mia came running from the direction of the restaurant, tears streaking her face, relief flooding her expression the moment she saw me standing safely on the street. "Ren," she cried, throwing her arms around me, "I thought something happened to you too." I held her tightly, my eyes still locked on Kael over her shoulder, questions piling up faster than I could organize them. He watched us for a moment, something unreadable in his expression, then took a slow step back, putting distance between himself and the two of us. "Go home," he said quietly. "Both of you lock your doors." "Wait," I said, pulling away from Mia slightly. "You cannot just say all that and walk away." "I have said more tonight than I should have," Kael replied, his voice tight, controlled again, the walls rebuilding themselves behind his eyes. "Please, go home." He turned before I could argue further, disappearing into the dark the same way he had appeared, leaving me standing on that empty street with my roommate shaking against my side and 100 unanswered questions burning in my chest. We walked home in silence after that, Mia too shaken to talk, me too confused to explain even if I tried. I kept replaying the image of those glowing eyes in the alley, the way the creature had looked at me specifically, like it recognized something in me that I did not recognize in myself. That night, lying awake in my small apartment, I could not stop thinking about Kael's words. Some people are not entirely people, not all the time. I thought about the warmth of his skin, too warm, almost feverish. I thought about the way his eyes had darkened that one evening when our hands touched, gold bleeding into something deeper. I thought about the guard who watched doorways like she was expecting danger to walk through them at any moment. I did not sleep much that night. Every small sound outside my window made my heart jump, made me imagine glowing eyes watching from the shadows below. But underneath the fear, something else had taken root, something I was not ready to admit to myself yet. I wanted to see him again. I wanted answers, yes, but more than that, I wanted to understand the strange pull I felt whenever he was near, the warmth that spread through my chest at the memory of his hand brushing mine over a bundle of white lilies. I did not know yet how dangerous that wanting would become. I did not know that the world Kael belonged to had rules older and crueler than anything I could imagine, rules that were about to reach into my small, simple life and pull me somewhere I never agreed to go. All I knew, staring up at my ceiling in the dark, was that whatever Kael Draven really was, I was already in too deep to walk away. 3 days passed before I saw Kael again. 3 days of jumping at shadows, of checking locks twice before bed, of catching myself staring out the shop window every time the bell above the door rang. Mia stayed with her sister for a while, too scared to sleep alone in our apartment. I understood. Some part of me was scared too, but another part of me, quieter and harder to admit, was waiting. He came on the 4th day, late afternoon, the shop empty except for the two of us. He looked different somehow, tired around the eyes, careful in the way he moved, like a man trying not to break something fragile just by existing near it. "You should not have come to the East Road that night," he said, before I could even greet him. "My friend was in danger," I said. "I did not have a choice." "There is always a choice," Kael said quietly. "You chose wrong." I felt anger flare up fast, hot and immediate. "I am sorry my friend's safety was not worth your rules." Something shifted in his expression, guilt flickering behind the frustration. "That is not what I meant." "Then explain what you meant," I said, crossing my arms. "Explain any of this. The creature, your eyes, the way you say things like some people are not entirely people and expect me to just accept it." Kael was quiet for a long moment, studying me like he was deciding how much truth I could hold without breaking. "My family carries old blood," he said finally. "Blood that changes us sometimes, makes us something other than human under the full moon or under certain conditions. Most people call families like mine cursed. We call it inheritance." "Inheritance," I repeated flatly, "like a family business." "In a way," Kael said, and for the first time something almost like humor flickered in his eyes. It disappeared quickly. "And that creature in the alley," I said, "was that someone like you?" "A distant cousin," Kael said. "Weaker bloodline, less control. He should not have been out that night, and I am dealing with the reason he was." I wanted to ask what dealing with meant, but something in his tone told me not to push that particular question. "Why do you keep coming to my shop?" I asked instead, the question that had been sitting under my ribs for weeks. "You never take the flowers. You never explain yourself. You just stand there and watch me like I am something you are trying to solve." Kael's jaw tightened. He looked away toward the window, toward the street outside, anywhere but at me. "Because you smell like something I have been searching for my whole life," he said quietly, "and I do not know what to do about that." The words hit me strangely, half compliment, half confession, wrapped in something I could not quite name. My chest went warm and confused all at once. "That is not an answer," I said, though my voice had lost some of its earlier sharpness. "It is the only honest one I have," Kael said. Before I could respond, the bell above the door rang, sharp and sudden, and the guard woman from before stepped inside. Her expression tighter than usual, urgency written across every line of her face. "Kael," she said, ignoring me entirely. "The council wants an answer by tonight." Kael's whole body went rigid. "Tell them I need more time." "They said no more time," the woman replied. "They said if you do not choose a mate from an approved bloodline by the end of this month, they will choose one for you. And Kael, you know what happens if you refuse the council twice." The word mate landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. I felt my stomach drop, confusion and something sharper twisting together inside me. "Mate," I repeated, looking between them. "What is she talking about?" Kael closed his eyes briefly, like a man bracing for pain. "It is complicated." "Then uncomplicate it," I said, my voice rising slightly. The guard woman studied me for a long moment, something calculating behind her eyes, before she spoke again. Alpha bloodlines are required to bond with an approved mate before their 30th year, or the family loses its claim to leadership. Kael is 29. I stared at Kael, waiting for him to deny it, to explain it away somehow, but he only looked back at me with an expression I had never seen on him before, something close to fear. "You have been coming here for weeks," I said slowly, pieces sliding into place in my mind, ugly and cold. "Buying flowers you never use, watching me. Is this why? Am I some kind of backup option?" "No," Kael said sharply, stepping closer. "It is not like that." "Then what is it like?" I demanded. Kael hesitated, and in that hesitation, the guard woman answered for him, her voice flat and clinical. "Bonded pairs recognize each other through scent. It is instinctual, not chosen. The first time Kael smelled you, his body reacted the way it only reacts to a true mate. That has never happened with anyone from the approved bloodlines the council keeps offering him." The room went very quiet. I remembered the first day, his hand brushing mine over the lilies, the strange warmth, the way his eyes had darkened for just a moment before he pulled away like he had touched fire. "You are saying I am your soulmate according to some ancient wolf biology?" I asked, disbelief creeping into every word. "I am saying I did not choose this," Kael said quietly, "but I also cannot make it stop." "That is not the same as choosing," I said, "for either of us." Before Kael could respond, the guard woman's phone buzzed sharply, and her expression darkened further as she read whatever message had come through. "They know," she said quietly, looking directly at Kael. "Someone told the council about him." Kael's whole body tensed, gold eyes flashing with something dangerous. "How?" "I do not know," she said, "but they are sending representatives tonight. They want to see him for themselves." "See who?" I asked, though some cold part of me already knew the answer. Kael turned to face me fully, his expression a mixture of dread and something almost protective. "You," he said, "they want to see you." My heart pounded hard against my ribs. Why would they want to see me? I am not part of your world. I sell flowers. "Because if the council confirms you are my true mate," the guard woman said, "tradition demands you be brought under the family's protection immediately. For your safety, and for the family's claim to remain valid." "Protection," I repeated slowly, the word tasting wrong in my mouth. "Or something else." Neither of them answered right away, and that silence told me everything their words had not. "I am not going anywhere with strangers," I said firmly. "I have a life, a job, a roommate who is probably worried sick about me right now." "It is not a request," the guard woman said, not unkindly but firmly. "Once the council confirms the bond, refusal is not an option written into our laws." Panic rose fast in my chest, sharp and cold. I looked at Kael, searching his face for reassurance, for some sign that he would fight this, that he would choose me over whatever ancient rules governed his world. "Kael," I said quietly, "tell me this is not happening." His eyes met mine, gold and pained, and utterly helpless in a way I had never expected to see on a man who carried himself like nothing could touch him. "I am sorry," he said. "I never meant for this to reach you." That night, as the sun set behind the hills outside my small apartment window, 3 black cars pulled up outside the flower shop, engines humming low and patient in the darkening street. I watched from behind the curtains, my heart pounding, Kael standing rigid beside me, the guard woman speaking urgently into a phone nearby. "There is still time to run," Kael whispered suddenly, surprising me. "If you want to disappear, I can help you, tonight, before they knock on that door." I looked at him, torn between fear and something else entirely, something that had been growing quietly inside me since the first day he stood too still in my doorway. "And if I do not want to run?" I asked quietly. Kael's eyes searched mine, something raw and unguarded flickering behind the gold. "Then you need to understand something," he said. "Once they confirm the bond tonight, there is no undoing it. You will be under my family's protection, under my protection, whether you agree to it fully or not." The knock came at the door then, sharp and final, echoing through the small shop like the closing of a cage none of us had built by choice. I looked at Kael one last time before the door opened, and in his eyes I saw the truth neither of us had said out loud yet. Whatever happened next, my ordinary little life was already gone. The door opened before Kael could reach it, and 3 figures stepped into the shop, each dressed in formal dark clothing that made the small space feel suddenly too small. At the front stood an older man with silver hair and cold gray eyes, his presence heavy in a way that made even Kael straighten his shoulders unconsciously. "Kael," the older man said, his voice smooth and controlled, "you have been avoiding the council for weeks." "Elder Voss," Kael said, his tone careful, respectful but guarded, "I did not expect you personally. When rumors reach me about an unregistered bond forming outside approved bloodlines," Elder Voss said, "I make time." His eyes shifted to me then, sharp and assessing, moving over me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve quickly. I forced myself to stand straight, though my legs felt unsteady beneath me. "This is the one?" Elder Voss asked, though the question was not really for me. "His name is Ren," Kael said, stepping slightly in front of me, his voice firmer now, "and he is not part of this council's jurisdiction." "He is if the bond is confirmed," Elder Voss replied simply, "which we are here to determine." One of the other figures, a woman with sharp features and dark eyes, stepped forward and reached into her coat, producing a small silver instrument that looked something like a compass, though the needle inside spun without any visible magnetic pull. "Approach him," Elder Voss instructed, gesturing toward me. Kael's jaw tightened, but he did not move. "This is unnecessary." "It is protocol," Elder Voss said, patience thinning in his voice. "Unless you prefer we confirm the bond through more traditional methods." Something about the way he said traditional methods made Kael's entire body go rigid, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw real fear flicker across his face. "Fine," Kael said quietly. "Do the reading, but nothing more than that tonight." The woman with the silver instrument stepped closer to me, holding the device near my chest, and I watched as the needle inside spun wildly for a moment before settling, pointing directly toward Kael like it had found true north. "The bond is confirmed," she said, looking toward Elder Voss. "Strongest reading I have seen in years." Elder Voss's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened with interest. "Then the matter is settled. The boy comes under the family's protection immediately, per tradition." "No," I said, my voice louder than I intended, surprising even myself. "I have not agreed to any of this." Elder Voss turned his cold gray eyes toward me fully for the first time. "Agreement is not required, young man. Tradition exists above personal preference." "That is not how consent works," I said, anger burning through my fear now. "You cannot just decide my life belongs to your family because some device pointed at him." A flicker of something almost like amusement crossed Elder Voss's face, cold and unkind. Spoken like someone who does not yet understand what he has stumbled into. Kael stepped forward then, placing himself firmly between me and the elder, his voice sharp with a warning I had not heard from him before. "You will not speak to him like that." "Careful, Kael," Elder Voss said quietly. "You are already treading dangerously close to defiance." "Then let me be clear," Kael said, his voice low and steady despite the tension radiating off his body. "I will not force him into anything against his will. If the council demands that, you will have to go through me first." The room went very still. Even the guard woman near the door seemed to hold her breath, watching the exchange with wide, careful eyes. "You would defy the council," Elder Voss said slowly, "over a florist." "I would defy the council over doing something I know is wrong," Kael said. "Ren deserves the right to choose, even if the bond is real, especially because it is real. Elder Voss studied Kael for a long, heavy moment, something calculating behind his eyes. Then, unexpectedly, his gaze shifted back toward me. "Very well," he said. "Then let the boy choose, but understand the consequences clearly before you decide, young man." "What consequences?" I asked, my heart pounding. "If you refuse the bond," Elder Voss said, "Kael forfeits his claim to leadership within the family. The bloodline passes instead to his younger cousin, a man far less capable of controlling the darker instincts within our nature. Creatures like the one you encountered on the East Road will multiply under his leadership, unchecked and unmanaged. People will get hurt, possibly killed." The weight of his words settled over the room like a physical thing. I looked at Kael, searching his face for some sign that this was manipulation, some trick to force my hand, but all I found was quiet, resigned honesty. "Is that true?" I asked him directly. Kael's eyes met mine, gold and pained. "Yes," he said simply. "My cousin does not have the control I have spent years building. If I lose my position, people will suffer for it. That is not a threat. It is simply fact." "And if I agree to the bond," I said slowly, "what exactly does that mean for me? Practically, not tradition, not council rules. What happens to my actual life?" "You would live under the family's protection," Kael said carefully, "which does mean restrictions, especially early on, while the council monitors the bond's stability. Movement outside approved areas would be limited at first." "Restricted," I repeated. "You mean I would be trapped?" "For a period, yes," Kael admitted, no attempt to soften the truth. "I will not lie to you about that, but it would not be forever, and I would fight every single day to make it shorter, to prove to the council that restrictions are unnecessary." I stood there, caught between two impossible choices, my mind racing through every version of my life this decision could create. Refuse, and strangers might die because of chaos I could have prevented. Accept, and I would lose my freedom, at least for a while, tied to a man and a world I barely understood. "Why does it have to be like this?" I asked quietly, more to myself than anyone else in the room. "Why can there not be a version where I get to keep my life and still do the right thing?" Kael stepped closer, his voice softening in a way I had not heard from him before, stripped of formality, stripped of the careful control he usually wore like armor. "I wish I could give you that version," he said. "I have wished it every single day since I first smelled you in that shop and realized what it meant. I did not choose this pull between us, Ren, but I refuse to let it become something that only takes from you. If you choose this, I promise you, I will spend every day proving the restrictions are temporary, proving you have not lost your life, only changed where you are living it for a while." I looked into his eyes, searching for the lie I expected to find, and found none, only exhaustion and guilt and something achingly close to hope. "And if I say no," I asked quietly, "right now, tonight?" "Then I let you walk away," Kael said, his voice steady despite the visible pain the words cost him. "And I carry the consequences of that choice myself, without asking you to carry any part of it." Elder Voss cleared his throat impatiently. "Touching as this is, we require an answer tonight." I closed my eyes for a long moment, feeling the weight of every version of my future pressing down at once. Then I opened them, looking directly at Kael, not at the elder, not at the guard by the door, only at the man whose hand had brushed mine over a bundle of white lilies weeks ago and changed everything without either of us choosing it. "I will accept the bond," I said slowly, my voice steadier than I expected. "But not because tradition demands it, not because your council decided my life belongs somewhere else now. I am choosing this because I believe you when you say you will fight for my freedom, and because somewhere between flowers and glowing eyes in a dark alley, I started caring what happens to you too." Relief broke across Kael's face, raw and unguarded, gold eyes shining with something that looked dangerously close to tears. "You will not regret this," he said quietly. "I promise you that." Elder Voss nodded once, satisfied, already turning toward the door with his associates trailing behind him. "The council will draft the necessary documents by morning. Kael, you know the terms." As the door closed behind them, leaving just the two of us standing in the quiet flower shop, Kael reached out slowly, giving me every chance to step back if I wanted to. I did not step back. His hand found mine, warm and steady, fingers lacing together like they were always meant to fit that way. "Thank you," he whispered. "Do not thank me yet," I said, managing a small, tired smile. "You still owe me an explanation for every strange thing that has happened since you first walked into my shop." For the first time since I had known him, Kael laughed, quiet and genuine, and something about that sound made the fear in my chest ease, just slightly, into something that almost felt like hope. 6 months passed before I understood what freedom inside a bond actually meant. The first weeks were hard, exactly as Kael had warned me they would be. Guards followed me to work every morning, standing quietly by the shop door while I arranged flowers, their presence a constant reminder that my life was no longer entirely my own. Mia thought I had joined some strange cult at first, until Kael sat down with her one evening and explained everything as gently as he could, answering every question she had with patience I did not expect from a man who once stood too still in doorways like the world owed him silence. I remember the night I finally asked him why he kept his control so tightly wound, why he never let himself relax even in small moments. "My father lost control once," he told me, sitting across from me at my small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea he never drank. "Before I was born, people got hurt. He spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it. I promised myself I would never let that happen, not even once." "That sounds exhausting," I said quietly, "carrying all that fear every single day." "It was," he admitted, "until recently." "What changed?" I asked, though some part of me already suspected the answer. "You did," he said simply. "Being near you does not feel like something I need to control. It feels like something that already fits." I did not know what to say to that, so I reached across the table and took his hand instead. And for a long moment, neither of us said anything at all. The silence between us warm instead of heavy for the first time since this whole strange story began. The restrictions eased slowly month by month, exactly as Kael had promised the council they would. He petitioned for expanded freedoms every few weeks, proving each time that the bond was stable, that I was not in danger, that keeping me confined served no purpose beyond outdated tradition. Elder Voss remained skeptical for a long time, but even he could not argue against results. By the 4th month, the guards no longer followed me to work. By the 5th, I could walk the streets alone again, my own person, simply living a life that happened to include a man with strange golden eyes and an old, complicated family. Mia eventually grew used to the strangeness of it all. She still teased Kael about the first time he walked into the flower shop looking, in her words, like a brooding album cover. Kael, to his credit, learned to laugh at himself a little more as the months passed, the constant tension in his shoulders slowly softening into something closer to ease. I kept the flower shop. That surprised people, I think. The idea that becoming bonded to someone so powerful did not mean abandoning the small, ordinary life I had built for myself. Kael insisted on it, actually. He said the shop was where he first saw something worth changing his entire life for, and he refused to let the council's rules take that away from me. "You are not just my mate," he told me one afternoon, watching me wrap a bundle of daisies for an elderly customer. "You are Ren, who runs a flower shop, who argues about dishes with his roommate, who laughs too loud at bad jokes. I did not fall for a title. I fell for you." I remember blushing furiously at that, embarrassed in front of the customer still standing at the counter, though she only smiled knowingly and told us we made a lovely couple before leaving with her flowers. There were still hard days, of course. Some nights, Kael's control slipped slightly under the pressure of a full moon, and I would find him standing alone in the garden behind his family's estate, jaw clenched, eyes flickering gold to black and back again, fighting something ancient and instinctual inside himself. I learned slowly how to help him through those nights, not by fixing anything, because some things cannot be fixed, but simply by staying close, my hand in his, reminding him he was not alone in carrying that weight anymore. "You do not have to fight this by yourself," I told him one such night, sitting beside him on the cold stone bench as he struggled to steady his breathing. "I have fought it alone my entire life," he said quietly. "I do not know how to do this any other way." "Then let me learn with you," I said. "We figure it out together. That is what this is supposed to mean, right? Bonded. Not one person carrying everything while the other just watches." He looked at me for a long moment, something breaking open behind his eyes, gold softening into something warmer, more human than I had ever seen it. "I do not deserve you," he said quietly. "Probably not," I teased gently, nudging his shoulder with mine. "But you are stuck with me anyway." That earned a real laugh from him, rare and unguarded. And slowly, over the following months, those moments of real laughter became less rare, more woven into the ordinary fabric of our days together. The council eventually granted full recognition to our bond, an honor rarely given so early, according to the guard who had once watched our doorway with such suspicion. Her name was Talia, I learned eventually, and she became something close to a friend over time, her sharp edges softening once she realized I posed no threat to the family she had sworn to protect. "You changed him," she told me once, watching Kael from across the estate garden as he helped an elderly relative into a chair, patient and gentle in a way I do not think he allowed himself to be before. "He used to be so guarded, cold almost. You gave him permission to be soft again." "I think he always had that in him," I said. "He just needed somewhere safe to let it out." 1 year after the night Elder Voss walked into my small flower shop with his cold gray eyes and impossible ultimatum, Kael asked me to marry him, not out of tradition, not because the council required it, but simply because he wanted to, standing among the same white lilies that had started everything between us. I said yes before he even finished the question, laughing through unexpected tears, and the sound of his relieved laughter mixing with mine felt like the closing of one story and the quiet, hopeful beginning of another. We were married in the same garden where he had first stood too still in a doorway, surrounded by roses instead of hedges, Mia crying loudly in the front row despite insisting beforehand that she would not, Talia standing guard out of old habit even though no danger remained to guard against. Standing there, hand in Kael's, surrounded by people who had once been strangers and were now something closer to family, I thought back to that ordinary morning weeks before everything changed, opening the shop shutters, trimming stems, believing my life was small in the best way. I had been wrong about one thing. My life was never meant to stay small. It was simply waiting for something big enough to walk through the door and make room for itself, gently, patiently, one bundle of flowers at a time. Kael squeezed my hand as the ceremony ended, leaning down to whisper against my ear, voice warm with quiet affection. "Thank you for choosing this," he said, "for choosing me." "Thank you for letting me choose," I whispered back. "That mattered more than you probably know." He smiled then, real and unguarded, gold eyes bright with something that looked exactly like home. We walked back down the garden path together afterward, no guards trailing behind us out of necessity, no council watching from a distance, no fear waiting in dark alleys to test what remained of our fragile new beginning. Just two men, bonded by something neither of us chose but both of us grew to want fiercely, walking side by side into whatever ordinary, extraordinary life waited for us next. Lesson: real love does not take away your freedom to choose. It earns that choice patiently, one honest moment at a time.